Good afternoon to those of you joining us in Washington and on the East Coast. Good evening to those of you joining in the Middle East, and good morning to those of you on the West Coast. Thank you all for joining us today for what should be a rich and timely conversation convened in partnership between the Israel Policy Forum and ROPES, the Regional Organization for Peace, Economics, and Security. My name is Rachel Brandenburg, Israel Policy Forum's Washington Managing Director and Senior Fellow. I want to welcome those of you who are joining Israel Policy Forum for the first time today, as well as our returning viewers. And I want to thank our supporters without whom we would not be able to provide free and timely information for our communities and constituencies. Today, I also want to extend a special welcome to the ROPES community, our ROPES partners, and turn over to Ksenia to say a word about the organization.
Thank you very much, Rachel, and thanks a lot to our amazing panelists. A few words about ROPES. ROPES is a young organization that connects forward-thinking young leaders from Israel, Palestine, and across the Middle East. We believe in two things. We believe in ending the conflict and finding a proper solution within the frame of a two-state solution that is agreed on both parties to bring along the solution for Israelis and Palestinians along, and also integration of both Israelis and Palestinians in the wider Middle Eastern fabric to bring along the vision of the post-conflict, prosperous and safe and peaceful Middle East. So you can find out more about us at ropes.org. We try to bring as much as possible young leaders face-to-face for really rare encounters so they can speak with each other, learn from each other, and know how to work with each other in the future. So thank you very much, Rachel. Back to you.
Thanks so much. I'll introduce you in a moment too. Over the next hour, as many of you who join us for webinars are familiar, I will ask our guests a few questions, but we'll also welcome audience participation. Please put any questions you have in the chat function, and I will incorporate as many as I am able into conversation. We are very fortunate today to have with us three longtime partners of IPF and experts from across the Middle East to share perspectives on Israel's wars in Gaza and Iran, regional politics and geopolitics, and where they think developments might go from here. I'll first introduce Dr. Ksenia Svetlova, joining us from Israel. Ksenia, as I mentioned, is Executive Director of ROPES and was previously the Director of Middle East Relations Program at the Israeli think tank Mitvim. She is a former member of Knesset and has deep expertise on the Middle East. Ksenia was born in Moscow and made Aliyah to Israel with her family in 1991 and holds a BA and MA in Journalism and Middle Eastern Studies from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. She served for 14 years as a reporter and analyst on Arab affairs on Channel 9, covering Gaza and the West Bank, and reporting from places like Tahrir Square, Damascus, Beirut, Manama, and Tripoli. Her reports and op-eds have been published in a number of international and Israeli media outlets. Next, we have Farah Bdour, a Jordanian political analyst and specialist in conflict resolution and mediation, who worked on peace-building efforts among policymakers and youth organizations. She is the director of a Jordanian think tank based in Amman that provides policy analysis and recommendations to the strategic community, both in Jordan and abroad. She serves as an advisor for a number of governmental agencies promoting people-to-people peace-building programs, dialogue, and reconciliation. Our third panelist, Dr. Aziz Alghashian, is a non-resident fellow at the Arab Gulf States Institute in Washington and a Saudi researcher and fellow with the Sectarianism, Proxies, and Desectarianization Project. His research focuses on Saudi-Israel relations and Saudi foreign policy. He holds a PhD on Saudi-Israel relations from the University of Essex, where he also teaches Middle Eastern studies, international relations, and political theory. He has written and been published by a number of places, including AGISW and the Washington Institute for Middle East Policy. Ksenia, Farah, Aziz, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Let's dive into the conversation. In the wake of the 12-day war against Iran, and with the campaign in Gaza still ongoing, Israel's regional outlook is characterized both by deepening challenges and emerging opportunities. The region has changed significantly since October 7th, and even more dramatically, one might say, since Israel's campaign against Hezbollah last year, the fall of the Assad regime, and more recently, the 12-day war with Iran. On one hand, there's talk of opening some level of relations between Syria and Israel, or Lebanon and Israel, and still Saudi Arabia and Israel. And on the other hand, we saw earlier today Israel striking in Damascus and still prosecutes a war against Hamas in Gaza. The ceasefire that President Trump and Special Envoy Witkoff have been pressing for with Egyptian and Qatari mediators still remains elusive. And all of this, of course, has ramifications for Israel's neighbors and the broader Middle East, to include Jordan and Saudi Arabia. I want to start with Farah and then Aziz. You each sit in very different parts of the same neighborhood. Jordan, in particular, finds itself in a precarious position amidst all of the regional conflagrations, popular sentiment, internal economic and political pressures, and of course, being directly impacted by what's happening in Israel, in the West Bank, in Gaza, and in Iran. How has the ongoing war in Gaza and the recent Iran war, and just sort of broadly the shift in regional dynamics, impacted the environment within Jordan and more broadly across the Arab world? Farah, go ahead.
Thank you, Rachel. Maybe it's worth if I compare how the region reacted to June escalation with its response to April 12 last year, when Iran launched its first ever direct attack on Israel from its own territory. Notably, Iran acted alone without the backing of its axis of resistance and without support from its key allies, Russia and China. And we could see back then the intricate web of regional and global alliances that Iran had spent years cultivating to protect its strategic interests. They just stood on the sidelines watching, and of course, each for their own reasons. This lack of regional backing for Iran was in a stark contrast to the coordinated support Israel received. In a contrast to Iran's isolation, Israel benefited from a robust multilateral coordination. The creation of the Middle East Air Defense Alliance back in 2022 provided a political and military framework for mutual defense. Adding to that, the role that the CENTCOM played in orchestrating the intelligence sharing and command and control. And we could see back then the emergence of a functioning prototype of what could become the Middle Eastern NATO, this elusive concept that we have been discussing for so many years. So this is to say that April 12 last year was a success story on many ways. It showcased what happened when regional players sharing threat perception, and they treated this threat as a top strategic priority, acting in concert to intercept the Iranian missiles and basically sparing Israel from what could have been a devastating outcome. However, while we saw the potential of this structure, we could see its limitations. Yes, regional actors agreed on the disruptive nature of Iran's behavior, but they diverged on how to deal with that threat. Arab countries clearly preferred diplomacy over military action, or at least wanted any military steps to be tied into a broader diplomatic process that could bring more stability. And that divergence stemmed from many things, but it stems from a deeper political sensitivities, especially around the unresolved Palestinian question. Even though they shared Israel concerned about Iran, the Palestinian issue remained a major obstacle to untap the full potential of this cooperation. Arab countries were careful to frame their involvement in countering Iran not as a support to Israel, not as defending Netanyahu's government, whose action in Gaza has generated deep anger across Arab societies, but instead they framed their involvement as an act of self-defense to protect their sovereignty, their people, and their skies. In parallel to the regional security posture, Arab states were also deeply engaged in diplomatic efforts. Between April 12th of last year and June 13th of this year, we witnessed extensive diplomatic efforts by Arab countries, not only to push for an end of the war in Gaza, but also through direct engagement with the Iranian officials. However, the more effort Arab states invested, the more frustrated they become with Netanyahu's continued rejection of Arab-led diplomatic initiatives. This frustration was matched by a growing sense of vulnerability. And here comes how Jordan also felt about that. They grow increasingly concerned about the risk of unilateral Israeli action against Iran, fearing it could drag them into a conflict and endanger the safety of their population. And this concern became especially acute during the June strikes. During last month confrontation, Arab countries initially distanced themselves from Israel. And yes, they condemned Iran's attack on Qatar, but there was a sense of an anxiety during the conflict. Gulf officials expressed serious concern about potential nuclear contamination. We all know that the Gulf countries depend on desalinated water. Most of Arab countries who are located in the line of fire, and especially Jordan, took precautionary measures. Some countries, they took measures of preparing emergency shelters and plans to provide guidance on what to do in the event of a nuclear incident or even a missile falling in a populated area, which actually what happened in Jordan, for example. Eventually, the work concluded in the best scenario possible, at least for Arab countries and Israel, but not for Iran. And while many were relieved to see Iran weakened, a very interesting dynamic has emerged. Regional actors have become increasingly wary of Israel's rising assertiveness and its emergence as the dominant power in the region. This power shift is now raising a new political and strategic question. There is a concern about how under Netanyahu's leadership and the backing of the extreme coalition, whether they're going to survive the summer session or not, Israel may seek to dictate a regional agenda that runs counter to the national interest of the individual Arab states. And this concern is reinforced by the way the current Israeli government has managed the war across the seven fronts so far, and relying heavily on military actions with little regard for broader diplomatic or regional stability. And these concerns extend even to any future Israeli government, with expectations that any government after Netanyahu will not change the current course drastically. So in this context, Arab states are becoming and beginning to reassess their own position. What emerged from June's escalation is a new security landscape, one in which Arab countries are now reflecting deeply on what comes next. That could unfold in different directions, depending on many variables, but particularly on how Israel and Iran chooses to act in the short and medium term. Very quickly, on Iran's side, it is reasonable to assume that Tehran will focus inward to deal with the massive intelligence breaches. There is, of course, a whole discussion about the efficacy of the Israeli and American strikes on Iran and whether that actually served the purpose of negotiating from a point of strength or serve the exact opposite, and will Iran, accelerate the acquiring of nuclear bomb or not? But in any case, I think regional countries, and especially Jordan, they cannot rule out that among the options that Iran still has is the reimagining of the role of its proxies in the region and shifting from its failed ring of fire strategy to creating a smaller destructive pockets of instability across the region. There is also an open question about will Israel keeps the multiple fronts it continues to operate on open, or instead it will choose to wind them down, and that ultimately would come down whether Israel is willing to engage in diplomacy. So depending on how both Iran and Israel move forward, the region may face very different future. An optimistic reading suggests that Iran's current vulnerability and the weakness of the proxy network present a rare opportunity to shape a new regional order, one built on durable security arrangements like the one that we saw in April, that neutralize the threats from Iran as well as groups from ISIS and Al-Qaeda. But perhaps the most resonant development is Israel's model of self-reliance backed by the US support that that model is increasingly being seen as a template for others. Arab states are now more convinced than ever that they too must invest in their own capabilities and take a full ownership of their national security. Whether this going to turn into strategic fragmentation or regional coherence, it's still up to us to see that. Maybe we could see a phase where regional countries will move into an arm race or more fluid web of bilateral relations. Or as I said, maybe that could be an opportunity for laying the foundation for a new regional security architectures. That all of that will remain to be seen in the next coming days. Back to you, Rachel.
Thank you. You very eloquently summarized so many complex layers of dynamics and relationships and some of the big questions. What does Israel do next? What does Iran do next? And where does the region have the opportunity to go to and chart each country and as a whole their own destiny versus where is everyone pulled to, depending on a few key actors' approaches. Aziz, what is your view from? I know you spend a lot of time in both Saudi Arabia and the UAE. From the Gulf, what would you like to add?
Thank you very much. Well, firstly, I'd like to just say thank you very much for organizing this, and to IPF for organizing this, and of course Ropes. And I hope Ksenia doesn't mind me saying this, but I'm actually part of this network that they're establishing as well. So it's really good to join you, and Farah, of course. I think there's just a few things that I would like to add to this as well. Is that firstly, Farah mentioned the notion of anxiety. And I think this is precisely what sums up perhaps the sentiment and the feeling from Riyadh and many places and all of the Gulf. But I'll stick, I'll primarily focus on Saudi. And I think this is precisely something that we have wanted to avoid. It's worth mentioning, to just contextualize a little bit about what's happening inside Saudi Arabia, which then explains kind of why they are very anxious and very keen to try to reduce any kind of tension and chosen this path of de-escalation. As anybody that would follow Saudi Arabia now, it's very difficult to avoid this sign, this insignia, this horizon of Vision 2030. I think whenever you speak to someone in Saudi Arabia or about Saudi Arabia, it's almost inescapable to talk about Vision 2030, which is this broad framework and a vision, really, a horizon of restructuring genuinely the Saudi state from trying to get it off that, as the Crown Prince said, that addiction of oil, and to have a very, very dynamic economy. And the notion of a different economy or a diversified economy and restructuring the economy for Saudi Arabia is not a matter of preference, but a matter of, it's an existential question. And this is genuinely why they believe in this so much and they're investing in it. And I think more importantly, that they have come to the conclusion that this cannot be attainable in an unstable region. And that's why there is this kind of what leads to the regional dynamic here. And of course, we're looking at this the continuous war of Gaza. This is something I think the Saudis have been very much constantly worried about and constantly, furiously trying to get an end to this and lobby and leverage their diplomatic capabilities. But I think we could get to that later on. I'd want to perhaps spend a bit more time on the 12-day war and what was the Saudi positionality. And hopefully I could shed light on that. I think the lens in which to explain Saudi is worth mentioning. I think a lot of people mentioned or assumed that Saudi and the GCC states were very happy and jubilant about these strikes, about these Israeli strikes, and they're secretly kind of saying, yes, keep going, keep going, keep going. And I think this lens of happiness and sadness is the wrong lens. in my opinion, I think it's far better, far more fruitful to look at this from a notion of security and anxiety rather than happiness or sadness. Why? Because I think it gives us a bit more nuance in looking at how we view the situation in Iran. I have to say from the very outset, no one's going to miss a gun pointed to their head. No one's going to miss someone, any kind of missiles or any kind of weapons that's pointing at them. No one's going to miss kind of the reduction of security threats. But the question is not really, is the action taken upon it? More, the real question is,
Did we lose Aziz for a moment? I'll give him a moment to see if we get the internet back. If not, I'm going to pick up on that security and anxiety lens and hand it to Ksenia to talk about that dichotomy from Israel. All right, I think we lost Aziz for the moment. While our team works on getting him back, Ksenia, this will take his whatever his thought process was in a slightly different direction, but I like that the dichotomy of security versus anxiety. And I'm interested in on sort of all of these regional dynamics, and in the wake of the Iran war, in the wake of October 7th, with the ongoing war in Gaza, how are you thinking about, and how are Israelis around you thinking about that security versus anxiety, opportunity versus challenge setup?
Yes, Rachel, thank you for this question. Well, indeed, and I agree, of course, with everything that my colleagues said before. There's this gap that sometimes it's very difficult to even conceive it between perception of Israel. First of all, as in one side, a strong country, the strongest country by far, military that achieves this spectacular wins and achievements in Iran and then Syria and Hezbollah. And at the same time, you hear the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, referring to the Hamas terrorists as a group of low-lives who were wearing flip-flops, and they were hardly armed. So if by October 7th, Israel was overrun by a group of low-lives with almost no weapons and in flip-flops, what does it actually say about its, the ability to protect, to ability to stand, in front of this threat and so on. So there is on one, there was this over the course of almost 2 years, I can tell you that we went very, very low in the scale of who we are and what do we think about IDF and what do we think about our country from this moment of great weakness that many people, not only the government, they compare it to pogroms and sometimes even to the Holocaust, because there was this sense of the critical weakness that allowed for this horror to take place and to happen. But then within quite a few months after the beginning of the military operation against Hezbollah, the beeper operation, the pager operation, and then everything that followed in Syria, and then of course Iran and the achievements there, I think that Israelis were thrown to the other part of the scale, the more extreme one, in where you think that you're invincible. So are you weak or are you invincible? Are you strong and do you have this superiority over other armies here in the Middle East to the degree that you can basically get rid of, significant part of Iranian leadership over the course of, 24 hours, something like this? Or are you a weak country that has to continue the infighting in Gaza because otherwise the events of 10/7 can repeat themselves? So I can tell you that you hear this dual messaging also on behalf of the leadership, but also within the general public itself. And I think that what is missing from this logical linkage is the very basic understanding that there are threats that Israel knows how to deal with military, and it excels in special operations, intelligence, of course. It has overwhelming superiority, of course, in the air and everywhere else. But after war comes diplomacy. After the war comes the diplomatic deed, the negotiations, the art of the deal, if you want. And in this field, it seems that we are lacking something very critical, because it's no wonder, that for them talking, of course, about the war in Gaza, the unfinished war in Gaza, that this deal, not only the deal that will release the hostages and put an end to the suffering in Gaza and the war in Gaza, but also the ground deal that will allow Israel to indeed take its place in the region, be acceptable on every possible level, to conclude formal relations with Arab countries, including Saudi Arabia, but not only, and also with some Muslim countries. Indonesia was part of this deal that was discussed, and also many others. And in the end of the day, will indeed turn the page of the 77 years of fighting, wars, being the so-called villa in the jungle, the expression that is often used in Israel. I personally hate it because I think that you cannot really survive as a villa in the jungle. You cannot survive if other parts of the jungle will become villas as well. And only then you will indeed, to have decent relations with your neighbors, and to achieve the level of security in which you will not rely only on weapons, but you will rely on agreements and on deals. So this kind of deal that many suggested that it was on the table prior to 10/7, I personally had reservations about that, because I also heard from Saudi colleagues and friends that, well, the missing component was, of course, the understanding of what, how, the Palestinian issue is going to be treated, and whether there will be a genuine solution for that, within the frame of the two-state solution or within some other frame, but what's going to happen next. And we knew 2 years before 10/7 that this current government was not capable of promoting any kind of frame that would be acceptable for Palestinians and also the rest of the Arab world. And we are in the same position today, but perhaps even worse though, because the situation escalated on the ground. The world changed tremendously. The Middle East changed tremendously after 10/7. And I think that the reflections, we can see it also in the very pessimistic polls about the attitudes towards two-state solution among the Israelis, but also among the Palestinians. Also, it depends what part of Palestinian autonomy are we talking. But in general, the belief that we can reach some kind of compromise politically, and not by the power of weapon. This belief, I think that it diminished completely. And therefore, I can tell you that whereas there is no doubt that the 12th day of war with Iran that produced so many V's, so many victories, but they do not conclude to this one decisive victory that would indeed turn the Middle East to the new Middle East, something that is debated largely after the elimination of Hassan Nasrallah, and then, of course, the change of the regime in Syria. But here we have infighting again in Syria, despite the change of reality and the change of figures there and so on. And in the end of the day, it's often been overlooked. And we're talking about regional dimension in the Israeli political sphere, that the only two borders that are peaceful today, they are borders with countries with whom we have full diplomatic relations and solid agreements, even if there are some coldness, and even if there are some problems along the way. These are Jordan and Egypt. And these two countries are being heavily underestimated. Effort to maintain this peace, to remain good and good allies to Israel, not only in regards to fulfilling the peace agreement themselves, but also in basically fighting against the Iranians and shutting down the Iranian rockets, or to preventing from some jihadist movement to flourish in Sinai Peninsula that can also threaten Israel, not only Egyptians. And in every possible way, the reality basically displays itself, and it shows that if there is no continuation of diplomacy after the war, in a way that happened with Egypt after 73, then we are destined to repeat these vicious cycles of wars endlessly, because there can be no military solution for the Palestinian problem. And this is where we are today, between Tehran and Gaza, between this feeling of mighty power and great achievements and elation, even, of sorts, that the Iranian threat maybe is not a threat anymore, or it's less threatening than it used to be before, and between Gaza, that is still remains an open sore, an open wound, and also a source of threat, because nothing is finished there, and the war is not concluded. And if anybody thinks that with the elimination of yet another Hamas member operative, we are closer to peace and security, then unfortunately the opposite is the true right now at this moment. The longer this war takes place, less security eventually, will be shared collectively by Israeli society. And this is, this part of this dilemma. This is where we are right now, and this is, where you have the Israeli society that is deeply divided along the lines of, what should be done next on Gaza issue and in general with the Palestinian conflict and so on. So we are between these two extremes, and we are in the middle of nowhere closer to achievement of real peace and real security.
Thank you. I wanna come back to you on how do we sort of shift the calculus a bit, but first I want to let Aziz pick up wherever you'd like or where you left off. You were talking about the security versus anxiety dichotomy when we lost you.
Yeah, well, thank you. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened, but thank you very much. What I would say was this whole idea of kind of security and anxiety approach that I think we had. I think I was trying to say, this idea about the Iranian missile program being really being at the receiving end of it, or at least having it pointed at us. In itself, I won't say there's much love loss for its dissemination. But the reality is, I think the Saudi posture and the GCC posture is asking a particular question. And that question is, what's next? What's going to happen afterwards? What is the alternative? And quite frankly, I think we've realized, and we've come to this conclusion that measures can be taken, military success and operations can happen, but whether we like it or not, these threats are not fundamentally eliminated. And also, why is there this aspect of anxiety? It's something that I think is important to mention. I think also the geography, the GCC and the Gulf states, and particularly Saudi as the biggest Gulf state there, we are in effect the front line of two different poles that are at war. In other words, we are really the front line or the battle in between two sides that we have both agreements with and also grievances with. So it's a very difficult aspect to balance, and this is precisely why there is a great deal of anxiety. And I think, we were very happy to see the things immediately de-escalate, but we really don't want to see this happen again. I think when it comes to the regional diplomacy or the GCC diplomacy and the normalization, Saudi-Iran normalization, what it tried to do is it tried to change the frame of the relationship between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And I think what it tried to do is basically speak to that Iranian anxiety that we are extensions of someone else to attack them. And this is why we've been trying to communicate this through a great deal of diplomacy by saying, listen, we are not against you. We are not going to allow any of our airspace to be used or a platform to be used against you. And I think that diplomacy was successful during that the Iran-Israel war. And I think we were successful in shielding ourselves from that. Now, where things got very complicated was really when the United States entered into the mix. Why? Because that was something that I think that was still a process that we're trying to manage far more. And not only this, I think for GCC states, or particularly, I think also Saudi, we have not only an anxiety with threats, we have also an anxiety with the extent in which partners, and in particular the United States, will see through operations. A lot of the times it's kind of this approach of one and done is something that I think is something that we were also very anxious of. I mean, and just to give you also an example, the operation that happened with the Houthis, the American operation that happened with the Houthis, there was this military campaign. All of a sudden, you hear whispers of saying, "Ah, this is, I think, the opportunity in time to mobilize forces to go into and use the army and go into and invade and capture Hodeidah and capture this exact." And I was thinking, what on earth is this? This is so distant. And before we knew it, the operation stopped. And if anything, that was an illustration of why we don't jump on any kind of military operation that hastily. What I would also say is that for me, we are now positioning ourselves to say, listen, we could restructure, or not restructure, we could try to deepen this rapprochement that we were having with Iran by saying, we're still here. We have illustrated to you that we are not extensions of anybody. But I think, so that's one of the opportunities I think that will actually happen. The other thing that I would say, and I want to kind of expand upon what Ksenia was saying, is that a lot of people are talking about the region and the opportunities that this is bringing, et cetera, et cetera. And I just think the Gaza situation is just too big to put under the rug. It's just too big. It's just too big. And this is something I've been trying to communicate to people and interlocutors time and again. This Palestinian issue is just simply too big to ignore. We cannot ignore it. If anything, we have seen the devastation that could come out of this. And this is only, something that we've seen on the Gaza front. What we are afraid of is how this is not only going to spill over into the region and how it's already spilled over into the region, but my worry is how this is going to have a radicalization effect on others in the region. And this is something genuinely that, even officials have even touched upon this. So I think now it's an opportunity, I think, to really address things from the very foundation of them. And this is when it comes to the whole Saudi-Israel normalization discussion. And I think a lot of the times people would like to treat the Saudi-Israeli normalization as the panacea of everything. That, if just before anything else, Saudi Arabia and Israel just normalize relations now, and everything else will just fall into place. And this is something I very much warn against. My first piece with IPF, Israel Policy Forum, was actually titled, Saudi-Israeli Normalization Will Be Great Only If It's Done Right. And what I was trying to say here is that, listen, this is something that I think is a strategic choice. Making peace with Israel, this is something that Arabs have said, this is something that the Saudis have said. But it must find itself on the right kind of, not only conditions, but the right kind of the right kind of process. There has to be a process here that makes a Saudi-Israeli normalization a facilitator of the two-state solution, a facilitator of a proper political horizons, not even proper political horizon, but economic horizons, institutional building. We need to leverage that, and it has to be done right, rather than just simply having a Saudi-Israeli normalization and then, hoping things fall into place, which it won't. This is why I think the aspect of sequencing normalization is very important. And I think here, right now, given the immense amount of trauma that I think a lot of people are not taking account enough in the region, each other's traumas that's taking place, saying two-state solution is a very difficult thing to engage with at the moment. And I think the political landscapes in both Palestine and Israel and elsewhere is very turbulent. But there is one thing that has happened, I think, since the war has started, which is that I'm seeing that there is actually more Arab discussion, and in particularly more Palestinian Arab discussion. And I think here I could point out to some, I could reference some interesting signs that have come out of Saudi by trying to work together with Palestinians and trying to build kind of a business council, trying to build and improve kind of the economy on the macro level, not necessarily kind of the piece for piece kind of thing, but on the institutional building. Now, it is with great regret that when an Arab delegation that was going to go to Ramallah and actually talk about institutional building, we're not allowed to go to Ramallah. And so here's unfortunately an instant where there is an obstacle that Arabs themselves and regional players are actually willing to go at the forefront and take the lead in building kind of Palestinian institutions. But here we see, unfortunately, a very intransigent Israeli government that's becoming a clear obstacle in this. And this is something I hope we could discuss more also in the United States, because I think had there been a more constructive role in facilitating this, maybe we could see more and more Arab discussion, and more, as Ksenia mentioned rightfully, that this is not only about integration of Israel, this is also the integration of Palestine and Palestinians into the region. And I think this is, and I'll end with this. If we focus, I'll be proud of myself. I'm trying to end without anybody telling me. But if we could focus on trying to integrate Palestine and Palestinian institutions into the region, integration of Israel will follow suit. Let's focus on integration before normalization, rather than normalization and then hope for the best. Let's focus on this. This is the step that I think that's most tangible. I think also the last point that I would say is that there is a aspect or a crisis of tangibility. One of the reasons why many people will speak about, why Saudis aren't playing much of a role, why aren't they doing this and doing that, and on this Palestinian-Israeli front, the reason why is because I think they feel that the situation has been shielded by a political dynamic that's constraining everyone from trying to engage properly. If one looks at the Saudi proactivity in Syria, the reason why they're actually very proactive is because they believe in the tangibles, that they believe that there is a government there, problematic as it may be sometimes, but there is an aspect that here's a government that's actually trying to do things, and that I think our investment, and we could leverage a lot of the things, and we could actually get some results. If we could just highlight this fact of tangibles, hanging fruits, things will start to materialize. And I think the region itself will start to play a more proactive role. So I think I'll end it there.
Thank you. I think each of you have touched on a number of shared themes, one of which is diplomacy is necessary to move things forward, to consolidate what what are some of the gains that Israel has achieved militarily. And there's a role for each leader and each populace, to include the US, who's sort of further afield and also has a different dynamic now than we're used to. Farah, I want to come back to you. Any reaction to all of this? And where do you see Jordan playing a role, given the position that Jordan is in?
Basically, as Aziz was saying, that there were a number of initiatives that Jordan was part of, an Arab-led initiative to do the heavy lifting in Gaza. Arabs, have stated that they are willing to put boots in the ground, commit for the reconstruction of post-war Gaza. And there were a lot of, talking about that. But the problem is Arabs will not do that in absence of a political, commitment from Israel. What the Arabs are, labeling as irreversible measures towards two-state solution. And of course, there are many dynamics, when it comes to reaching a ceasefire deal or hostages deal in Israel. Some of it has to do with Hamas, and some of it has to do with Israel. If we talked, for example, about Hamas, which Hamas that we are talking about? After the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh and Yahya Sinwar, and then his brother Muhammad, the group, decided that they want to create a temporary leadership committee consist of 5 members. 3 of them, they are in Qatar, 1 of them in Turkey, and the last one in Gaza. His name is Izzeddin al-Haddad. He is the commander of the Gaza City Brigade. And he's someone who's inexperienced, does not necessarily have a strategic vision for the group, but he's the one who's like taking a decision when it comes to hostages. And that makes, the work of Qatar and Egypt is as hard as it is. If you look at the Israeli side, yes, we can talk about the issues, the contentious issues that is being discussed right now in Qatar, whether the scope of IDF withdrawal, to the March 2 line. We can talk about the humanitarian city. We can talk about Hamas weapons, and all of, these issues. But I think it's not about the technicalities that we are discussing. The whole reaching a deal and making this unlock that will have a regional impact has to do with Mr. Netanyahu's balancing between the demands or desire of Mr. Trump of reaching a deal and his coalition members, Mr. Ben Gvir and Smotrich, who obviously have a different plans for Gaza. They think and they hope that they will, that the IDF will reoccupy the strip. If not that, they are expecting that any concessions that will take place in Gaza will be compensated elsewhere in the West Bank, which really bring us to the role of regional countries, because regional countries, as I said, they are not willing to put any kind of support for post-war reality without a commitment from Israel to a two-state solution and irreversible measures to do that. So Jordan is part of the Arab consensus around these issues. They are willing, and Jordan is willing to help Gaza, like it helped from the beginning of the war and even before that. But again, in the absence of any political commitment from Israel within a regional framework, I think it's hard for any Arab country, whether Jordan or else, to do anything to change the reality of Palestinians on the ground.
Thank you. We've gotten a number of questions about the situation in Syria. Obviously, an ongoing conflict, an ongoing state building experiment on the part of Syrian leadership. Ksenia, can you talk a little bit about what Israel is doing in Syria, what opportunities there are, whether they're being taken or not?
Yes, Rachel. So again, as with everything else, we find ourselves between 2 extreme situations and solutions and scenarios. So one of them, and this was something that was discussed from the first day of after the falling of Bashar Assad's regime, that Israel will control de facto or de jure a significant chunk of southern Syria, mostly to protect itself, its border, not taking risks after the 10/7, talking about anxiety, and given the presence of many militias, some of them very unsavory and jihadi type militias that are right now integrated in the Syrian security forces, but nevertheless they didn't stop, being extremist and violent and dangerous jihadi militias. So therefore, the campaign started very early on, before it was clear what kind of regime will exist in Damascus, and it is ongoing. So it seems that right now, except of holding to some patches of Syrian land near the border on the Syrian part of the Syrian Golan Heights. So we see right now this expansion of these activities in Sweda, which is remote, 80 kilometers remote from the border with Israel, is basically prolonging of the long arm of the IDF to that area to prevent mostly from the governmental forces to take a stronghold there, to build a stronghold there, and to control any of these areas. So of course, there were traditionally connections between Israel and some of the Druze leaders. At the same time, I have to also remind that some of the Druze in Syria also collaborated all of this time with not only with the Syrian regime, but also with Hezbollah. And therefore, the framing of this story as, well, we are coming to the aid of our Druze brethren, when it was absolutely clear to everybody, and every military expert will. Recently, the northern part of southern Syria was traditionally very hostile to Israel. So I think we are talking here more about security than necessarily only of protection of the minorities. During the endless civil war in Syria, Israel was basically watching and not intervening, even when the minorities suffered tremendously from the war, and specifically from the brutal persecution by Bashar Assad's forces and also by the Russian army or the Iranian militias. So it seems to me that there will be no continuation to the story, mainly because of the very strong position of the US. We heard Secretary of State Marco Rubio talking to journalists very recently and saying that the de-escalation is near, and that US is very concerned about that. And again, it seems that we are dealing here with tactical decision right now to protect the Druze and to extend the influence of the IDF in the southern Syria and so on. But strategically, if we are looking at the long term, and the other extreme of this equation was that Israeli society debated widely during the last few weeks possibility of a peace treaty with Syria. So these two extremes, they are very worrying, because first of all, the long-term strategy and policy, what Israel actually wants to achieve in Syria. How does it see, right now the term, perhaps, this government is unstable, the whole situation is unstable, so how, Israel is to work around this situation. And from the statements of various Israeli officials, it's clear that, there is still ongoing basically debate between these two extreme positions, so basically occupation of large chunks of Syria, of southern Syria, for to increase security and so on, or peace deal that is being pushed by the American administration, but in the middle lie everything else. It's the military presence in the Golan Heights and the Syrian part. It's of course the right now with the bombardment of not only some points in southern Syria, but also of Damascus and of the basis of the army and the presidential palace, even, and then, some places that were nearby. So all of that brings me to a conclusion that right now the Israeli government is mostly focused on tactical wins. And there is a tactical win vis-a-vis, for example, the Druze community in Israel that is very concerned, of course, for the well-being of their brethren and so on. Security-wise, again, it showed, its upper hand on everything. But in the long term, if we are talking about building this very delicate relations with the Syrian regime. Right now, it's the regime. We don't know if it will last, but for now, they are there. It seems that there is no consistent and long-term policy here, and that's what's most worrying.
Thank you, Ksenia. Yeah, the whiplash from week to week or day to day of sort of which direction things seems to be going has really been quite acute. I want to turn to Aziz next. I know you want to respond to a couple of things that have been said. I'd also like you to incorporate in your response your thoughts on what about Arab leaders speaking to the Israeli population? I think you've put this out there before. You've been part of conversations. The idea that the op-ed by Emirati ambassador to the U.S., Yousef Al-Otaiba, in Israeli press really made a difference in speaking to the Israeli people. Would you envision something like that from Saudi leadership at some point? Would it make a difference? What would it take to get there? So Aziz, over to you for a quick comment. And then I have a lightning round question for everyone to close our discussion.
All righty. Thank you very much. I'll be very quick. I think the first thing that I'd say is to expand upon, I think, a lot of what Ksenia was saying, which is basically also highlighting a lot of the difficulties ahead for Syria and Lebanon. The idea, in my opinion, the idea that it's a done deal and the regime has fallen, etc., and then now we're upon a new era. I think it's still lots of work till we go there. To lots of work till we get there. Now, why am I trying to say this? Is I think not to be, to paint a picture of doom and gloom, or I've been renowned for being a party pooper a lot of the times for this discussion, but is to say I think perhaps there is genuine opportunities here if we leverage things and themes that are already happening in the region. Now, Syria still requires a lot of help. Lebanon still requires help. Of course, the Palestinian dimension in both the West Bank and Gaza still will need a lot of attention. And this is why I think now it's probably worth thinking about reconstruction diplomacy. And this idea of reconstruction diplomacy is basically not necessarily about just spending money, and just like what Farah was saying earlier, that we'll just spending money absent of a political process. That's not going to happen. Instead, what I think is about leveraging some of the themes, the international themes, the massive projects that are going to take place, and trying to find ways to fit them into this kind of reconstruction of this region as well, but also reconstruction of the process. The process is we can't keep doing the same things as we did before. So I think reconstruction of the leveraging the international projects like IMEC, etc., and also leveraging the private sector and regionalizing these initiatives and reconstructing the process, which leads me to the question that you asked. Here, I am someone who believes in more open discussions, but I've been saying this for a long time. And by the way, there are precedents where Saudi officials have actually communicated directly to the Israeli audience. But time and again, I think it seems to be eclipsed and overlooked. Now, why I don't see Saudi officials engaging directly and openly like an op-ed or even a discussion directly on TV or something right now is because there is, unfortunately, and Ksenia could speak to this far more than I can, and I wish she could correct me if I'm wrong, but there is an over politicization of any kind of Saudi interaction and the notion of Saudi inside Israel. The idea that any kind of discussion or hint of any kind of discussion is framed as not only just potential normalization, but a normalization that excludes the Palestinian issue. That here is the fact that a Saudi is willing to talk with us without any of the Palestinian issue, and therefore this is fantastic, and this is the kind of normalization that we want. And the Saudis are incredibly cognizant of this. They understand that unfortunately they're being disframed, and a lot of the Israeli media and not even Israeli media, I would say, even, but kind of the pro Netanyahu and this pro kind of this pro normalization, this pro peace for peace normalization, this pro normalization outside of a Palestinian issue. And this is something that I think the Saudis will not want to engage. And moreover, this illustrates also the way the notion of eliminating opportunities for more discussion. The unhealthy discourse about Saudi Arabia inside Israel by Israeli politicians right now is actually distancing the notion of any kind of real, genuine interactions. So, because they are afraid that this is going to be taken the wrong way. And so I think this is why I'll point out to Lebanon in 2006, where I think Saudi criticized, of course, the Israeli government, but they also criticized Hezbollah. And I think the biggest story was the fact that Saudis have criticized Hezbollah. And they treated it as some sort of kind of victory, or they treated it as some sort of alignment with Israel. And therefore, I think maybe one thing that we need to be doing is perhaps having stuff like this, open discussions, where we get perspectives from the region to speak healthily about the ways forward, which can generate then the right environment for these kinds of big opportunities that may be on the horizon. So I think we need to work towards that. But right now, they're making these opportunities very, very distant. But we still need to work towards it.
Thank you. I appreciate the optimistic note. I think as both Israel Policy Forum, if I can speak for Ropes, that is precisely the direction we would like things to go. We're a little bit over time, so I'm going to give you each the opportunity to offer a closing thought and incorporate a lightning round question, which you are welcome to punt because this may be impossible to answer. But what are your views on which scenario of these two is more likely? Agreements, large or small, that help to shape the Middle East, or the continuance of power disparities and unilateral actions that foreclose the potential for those diplomatic agreements? And I will say this is incorporating another audience question. I will start with Farah, and then Aziz, and then Ksenia.
Thank you, Rachel. Very quickly, I think for years to come, we know that the United States going to be Asia-focused and China-focused. So I can see that the regional countries will play more assertive role in taking, control of their national security and do the heavy lifting in dealing with the different conflicts in the region. I see that at the beginning, they're going to start as a bilateral agreement that will give them the freedom to address the very complex challenges that they face. But later on, these bilateral agreements might evolve and might balance each other in the future and might evolve. But for the time being, I see it more of a bilateral rather than more of a, comprehensive security framework.
Sure. Thank you. Aziz.
I think if I understand the question properly, I think I would say, that we have to be very careful because I think that there's a lot of forces, there's a lot of themes, processes that are making kind of the unilateral actions more tempting and more logical. I think, in my opinion, this is why we need to strengthen institutions and not only multilateral, but I think minilateral institutions far more. I think we need to, strengthen the trust in those things, and these agreements, and at least we need to reference it. A lot of people say, well, it's not worth looking at an agreement because what's the point? No one's going to follow it. But I think having it as a reference at least is something. So I hope it's optimistic enough, but there's going to be a lot of work that we need to do. And I think just one more thing, just very quickly, I think the idea of public diplomacy is very, very important about these kinds of agreements. A lot of these agreements require a campaign of awareness, and also not only just awareness of the difficulties of not adhering to these things, but also the opportunities that this can lead. So a lot of it is, a lot of public diplomacy is needed.
Thank you, Ksenia.
Well, I used to be an optimist, but then I was elected to Knesset and I became a pessimistic realist. At the same time, I do think that we are living in extraordinary times. There is a window of opportunity ahead of our region. And I prefer to talk about regionality because we have a unity of goals and our future is shared. We have to understand it, that nobody in this region will be able to survive because of the climate change, because of many other issues, because of the security architecture, because of myriad of other problems. We can only survive if we are together, if we will see ourselves as a region. And I think that things that are happening in the last 20 years at least, there are evidence of that. New alliances are being created. New opportunities exist. You have to know how to seize them. If you will not understand how to use this, it can be something that will, the window can be shut as well. And then you will go, oh, okay, it was open for a while, but now it's not anymore. Again, a lot of, depends on the constellations in politics. Whether, for example, the Israelis will get to have a new leadership, whether the Palestinians will. And there are a lot of questions, more than answers right now. But I think that we are closer actually to not into a new Middle East. The new Middle East will be the same Middle East with its grudges and with its problems and its divisions. Nothing is going away only because you signed some paper. You have to really work in order the reality change. But I think that it's inevitable. It's inevitable that we will reach this point in which we understand that we are basically hanging on, or we will hang next to each other. So it's something that I think that the peoples understand it before their political leaders do. And I can only tell from experience of ropes that when we bring people from the whole region together, not only just two peoples, not only just Palestinians and Israelis, but we put them in the room with Moroccans and Jordanians and Emiratis, and Algerians and Libyans and Syrians and Saudis and everybody else, then you really can see the magic that is happening there. You see the spark in this, young people's eyes, that they understand that there are fantastic economic opportunities, fantastic cultural opportunities, diplomatic opportunities. But to make all of this happen, you need to make politics work first. So politics is important. You cannot substitute with just some dream of, okay, let's sign some economic agreements and, they will do the trick. No, they will not do the trick. You have to really put a solid policy in front of you and work together in cohesion with others, respecting them and treating them as equals. Then we will all have a chance to a better tomorrow and a better Middle East.
Thank you. That is a wonderfully optimistic, if perhaps realistically optimistic or optimistically realist note to end on. I think we've heard from all of you. All layers of society need to be involved. Diplomacy needs to follow any other tools in our respective national security and national interest toolboxes. And every partner in the region, every country in the region, I would add us in the United States, all have a part to play and are all affected by the outcomes. We have gone over time because I wanted to continue this conversation, and I'm sure we could continue for hours. Each of you and a number of the audience questions have given me ideas for at least 4 more conversations that we will need to hold and topics to address in forthcoming webinars. Ksenia, Farah, Aziz, thank you each for taking the time to join us and for sharing such valuable and timely and really unique insights and analysis of the evolving dynamics in your neighborhood, in the broader Middle East. It's been really a valuable discussion. To our audience, thank you for taking time to listen and participate in this conversation. For anyone interested in more analysis from IPF or to sign up for emails, webinars, and webinar announcements, Israel Policy podcasts, and more, feel free to go to www.israelpolicyforum.org. Thank you again, and I look forward to continuing all of these conversations in other forum. Have a great afternoon and evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Thank you, Farah, and thank you, Aziz, for your wonderful
Thank you.
contributions.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Ksenia.
IPF, for
Thank you all.
partnership.
Thank
Thank
you.